Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for joining Natspec's webinar, which is to introduce the home learning project materials. My name is Dawn Green. I'm a Natspec director, and I have facilitated two of the themes of the project that we're going to introduce you to this afternoon. I'll just deal with some of the housekeeping arrangements before we move on. So all attendees have joined us in listen only mode. We would invite you to ask questions through the question pane, and we'll pick those up as we go along. We're introducing two themes today, so we're going to focus on the learning material and monitoring progress for learners at home, and we intend to take a break for questions after the learning material section before we move into monitoring progress, and then again an opportunity to ask questions at the end. I'd like to introduce the team of people that are joining me this afternoon to deliver this webinar. We have Yola from Natspec, Shari from Sense College, Jay from Newfriars College, Angela from Portland College, and Loki from St John's College. So it's really good to have these colleagues with us, and I really hope that you enjoy this webinar and that we manage to really interest you in the materials that we've developed, and give you a taste of what you can access at leisure after the webinar. So if I could go on to the next slide, please. So the purpose of the webinar is to introduce the new Natspec Home Learning Project website and to share some of the material with you in this webinar. We'll not have time to go through it all, but hopefully we'll be able to dip into parts of the website and give you a feel for the material that there is in the website. This is the first webinar of a series introducing the material, and there are other webinars to follow. On the 3rd of June, there is a webinar for therapy and wellbeing. On the 9th of June for transition into and from college, and on the 11th of June for supporting families to play a role in home learning. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the Natspec Home Learning Project was implemented really to assist colleges to move on from a crisis response following the very sudden closure associated with the COVID-19 pandemic to a more measured response. And what we really wanted to help colleges to do was to consider what quality looks like in these 6 key areas that you can see on the slide in front of us, and how to go about achieving that. And the project really began as a COVID-19 project, but as we've developed the approaches and the material, it's really got us thinking that the resource that we've developed will have longevity beyond lockdown, and as colleges begin to get back to normal and beyond. So we think that this resource could be really useful to support learners during periods of ill health, or to support a blended learning approach, or to set learning during closure, such as on snow days. It might be useful to help learners to maintain skills during holiday periods. Certainly we think it will be beneficial for involving parents and carers in the learning of the young people they support. And for those learners who are able, it should help to encourage more independent learning. What we've deliberately avoided doing is creating a really large collection of resources, because one of the things that we recognised from the early days of lockdown was that actually it was quite overwhelming, the amount of content that was provided. You know, it was just really difficult to kind of find your way through that and identify things that could be useful. So what we've tried to do in this project is very much to drill down to identify the characteristics of effective practice. And we've done that by pulling out the things that we think are really important in that the planning of learning for individuals with complex needs. We've provided for each area a self-audit tool and guidelines on effective practice. And we've included examples from colleges who took part in the project. So, you know, these are materials that have been used by practitioners that participated, although we do recognise that obviously they would need to be individualised and adapted to meet learners within your own environments. So the content that we've developed was developed directly by practitioners who are working remotely to support SEND learners in their own homes. And we have created this material very swiftly. So it's been developed by around 70 practitioners over a period of 3 weeks. We're hugely grateful to the colleagues who was so generously gave their time and their expertise to this project during this period. And as I've said before, I'm really delighted that Shari, Jay, Angela, and Loki are available to join us today. Okay, so if we could now move on, please, to the next slide. We're now going to go out to the website, to the Home Learning website, and talk you through the navigation and what you can expect to see within this website. We might just take a little while for Yola to get the website up for us, but once she's done that, we'll be able to scroll through. What we've tried to do is to focus on obviously a clear layout and something, thank you Yola, and something that is easy to navigate. So what you can see from the main screen, from the home page, is running across from left to right. We've got those 6 themes that you've already seen on the on an earlier slide, and each one of those categories has a guidance page, and each guidance page provides resources that are contextualized. So it's very important to us to be able to, you know, kind of give a context for linking a resource, and one of the things that we tried to do when we were developing the material was to ask ourselves about the purpose for including that resource within the packs. So, you know, there was quite a robust moderation process within the teams of practitioners that were working, and hopefully you'll see that this is quite a rich source of resources, and it really, you know, kind of helps to see the context in which they've been used. Yeah, look, if we could go down to the bottom, please. So, sorry, go up a little bit further. I'm on the wrong page. Could we go to the Home Learning home page, please, rather than the learning material? Okay, and if we could just scroll to the bottom of that page, please. Yeah, perfect, thank you. Just up a little bit more. Thank you. That's perfect. So you can see from here the other way that you can navigate the material. You can actually browse through the resources at the bottom of the Home Learning homepage. And we thought that it was very important that you were able to do this, because this will take you straight through to the resource. But you can also sort the resources based on cohort suitability. So you can see just at the bottom of the list there that we've got resources that are suitable for learners with ASD, PMLD, and so on. And Yola, if you could just go down a little bit further, please. Yeah, a bit more. Keep going to the bottom, please. Perfect, thank you. So you can now see that at the bottom of the screen, in terms of navigation, there's a search function. So within the main home learning project homepage, you can get out to the guidance pages for each one of the categories, or you can browse through the specific resources at the bottom, or you can specifically search for information. Okay, thank you. If we could now go to the learning material page, Yola. Thank you very much. And if you could just scroll down for me, please. Yeah, to just go up a bit more to the beginning of that. Thank you. Okay, so what we have within the learning material page are a set of overarching effective practice principles relating to the provision, and then we've developed a checklist to assist with planning and prioritising. You can use that as a self-audit tool, either organisationally to kind of evaluate the effectiveness of your home learning provision, or an individual practitioner supporting a student could use that in that one-to-one situation as well. So there's quite a lot of flexibility about how that could be used. We've then got some cohort specific guidance, and in a little while I'm going to hand over to my colleagues to talk you through the sections that they've led on. And then if you could just scroll down a little bit more, please, Yola. Yeah, just keep going. So long list of contributors, all those very generous people. There are the effective practice principles. Keep going down. Here's the home learning checklist, and you can actually download that as a Word document. We're not going to click on these links because it will just take too much time, but at your leisure you'll be able to go in and access these materials. I want to say something about the continuation of learning, because we recognise that things are very different for all of us with the COVID-19 pandemic. And what we really want to do is to kind of make sure that we're encouraging people to take stock and to reprioritise. And within this section of the resource, we have included a few key bits of guidance that we hope will be useful. So the first one is some guidance on how to structure a review meeting around, kind of the learning programme and the current priorities. The second bit of guidance there within that section is some guidance on maintaining professional standards for people who are working in a very different context to the one that they're typically working in. And then the final guidance document is a best practice guide on video conferencing. So hopefully you'll find those materials are useful. Just underneath that then, we're looking at the tools that both National Star College and Newfriars College have shared in terms of supporting continuity of learning. we've thought about the ways in which we can provide that information around what the learning programmes look like currently, given the different context in which people are learning. And definitely I would encourage you to have a look at those links and the tools that the colleges have shared. And then moving down to the preparation for adulthood, we felt that it was important to share ideas and suggestions for embedding learning into daily activities, and therefore making the best use of resources around the home and the maximum opportunities within an environment which obviously learners and their parents and carers are most familiar with, because, you know, we've had discussion around family support and parents and carers who are quite overwhelmed and daunted at the prospect of supporting their young people. So we just want to be able to make that as easy as possible for them to be able to engage with, and obviously using activities that are familiar to them is a really good way of doing that, and just making it more manageable and more achievable for the parents and carers that we're so dependent on at the moment. So we are now going to go down and consider the cohort specific material. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Shari from Newfriars College. She's going to guide us through the information for students with sensory impairments. Thank you, Shari.
Thanks, Dawn. Hi, everybody. Yola, if we could click on the link to go into the guidance for learners with sensory impairment. And then just scroll down, lovely. Okay, so I'm just going to run through what we've prepared here for learners with sensory impairment. Firstly, I'll just point out that we've identified who this group might be, but we recognise that it's very broad and each individual within this group will have unique needs, regardless whether they've got a hearing impairment, vision impairment. The specific needs will be unique to them. One of the common descriptions was that we recognise that perhaps their loss may not be fully compensated by another sense, and therefore they would result in significant barriers to accessing information, communication and mobility. So our focus really was around minimising those barriers to learning and encouraging participation in learning at home. Often in our colleges, we provide a specialist approach and a facilitated inclusive environment and adapted resources. So it was really looking at ways we could kind of encourage that in the home. So we've split it into 5 categories. They were access, environment, structure, planning activities and recording progress. So for the access section, we kind of looked at no one size fits all approach and really felt that it was important that sensory assessments, those specialist assessments, were really followed closely. And you'll see there's a link there to the National Star College, who's provided some best practice advice. And then there's some tips on formatting materials, because it's really important that anything that's sent home is accessible and has already been formatted for the unique needs of that learner. We look at accessibility features, so if anybody's using online learning or online materials, that they have access to those. And we look at minimising social exclusions when using sort of video conferencing. And again, sort of the appropriate vocabulary and supporting parents, because most of the learners will be used to having a communication partner or some form of intervener, and it might be about having a sort of a discussion about the impact of that loss and how parents might be able to support at home. Thank you. And then the next section, environment. So we explored in our subgroup how we can encourage for the facilitating the learning environment, communication and independence, which are key factors. And we felt it was really important that we support parents to find the right environment to learn in and create those optimum learning environments. So discussing with parents their workspace, finding out if there's visual clutter, if there's environmental distractions. So there's some tips on that in there. And if we carry on scrolling down, please. And then looking at the particular activities that they're carrying out, that those that map to the home. And then there's a resource from Portland College on creating a safe or calm place for learners in the home. And then structure. So this was one that we felt that was really important, and we looked at some tips for creating structure and routine to help support well-being. Most of the learners may be experiencing a wide range of emotions, and probably more intense emotions than what they perhaps would usually experience, which might result in some new behaviours. So we looked at some tips around establishing routine, encouraging consistency, and also looked at planners. Some of these learners may have an underdeveloped concept of time and may use their usual routines to help anticipate events that are about to occur. So it would be really good to kind of speak with parents or organise a daily planner for the learners to use to anticipate what's going to be happening through the day, to give them a sense of control. Then we have a link in there from Portland College, which provides some wellbeing learning activities. And we looked at tips for minimising sensory overload and using repetition to help build in that structure. Okay. And then planning activities. So we felt it was really important to provide some tips on the quality of planning materials and talking through some of our own experiences. We recommend checking any links that you're sending home, ensuring that they are age and level appropriate. Again, you can check for accessibility features. Trialing any scenarios. So if you're planning to do an online session, practice it with a colleague. Make sure that you think about any issues that you may encounter and how you can improve that before you deliver it. Try to embed interest, and then there's lots of tips about being flexible, patient, embracing opportunity. Scroll down. That's it. And being aware of affordance. So if you're providing resources, that's great. But if we're looking to use resources that are in the home, it's making sure that those are available, that learning activities are practical. So there's a sensory scavenger hunt story in there provided by Sense College, and that looks at an activity that can be then adapted by teachers to suit the specific needs of the individual and their specific targets. And then we kind of pointed out to try and follow the learner's individual plan or EHCP and not throw in random filler tasks without purpose. A lot of you might have built up rapport with parents and got them on board, so we don't want to be taking up their time with filler tasks unless that's something that they've requested. And then our last area was recording progress. So we looked at some tips on supporting parents to report on learning. So we looked at recording online sessions and then ways of tracking small steps. So there's a reflective log provided there that you could use parents to capture those small steps and look back at what progress has been achieved over time. It might also be useful to use a reflective log to see where learning might be going wrong or to work out when to move the task on. Some parents might prefer to communicate over the phone to kind of talk through what the learner has achieved. So try not to overwhelm parents with complicated tracking sheets, but it might be beneficial to set up some kind of system within the college for mapping progress and kind of creating a consistent method of collecting the evidence. One of the methods that we had all kind of collectively used was event logs on Databridge. So that can kind of link through to the targets, and there's more on progress and feedback in the link at the bottom there. So I think that's kind of runs through briefly the contents there. So I'll hand you back to Dawn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shari. Yola, if you could go back to the section for the cohorts for students on the autistic spectrum, please. Thank you. Yeah, if you could click on the link, please. Great, okay, and scroll down, please. I'm just going to talk through this material. Yeah, that's great, thank you. Okay, so a subgroup of people worked on this section, and one thing that everyone was agreed with was, of course, that there are many different approaches for supporting people with autism, and we came back to that real need to individualise our approach. The set of principles there that was developed by Portland College was something that we thought we should include in the pack for you to refer to, and we had a number of resources and ideas that were shared by colleagues that were around structuring the day and working through daily living activities. And we've got some examples there from Camp Hill Wakefield, who had developed a living skills tracker that is highly individualisable, if that's a word, and a really good way of getting agreement for kind of the key activities that should be completed during the day, and then monitoring how that went. QAC have got a really nice way of working through home learning agreement activities as well. And they were trying to use that to engage people and to motivate them, and they turned it into a game of bingo. So that's well worth a look. And again, all of these are really customizable resources that you can access the example, and then you can make that suitable for a wide range of needs to suit the people that you're supporting. Camp Hill Wakefield again have developed a really good reward system, which provides a visual way of structuring the day. But again, the great thing about that is just how easy it is to individualise that resource. So hopefully, again, that's something that will give you some really good ideas, and that you'll just be able to tweak that to meet the needs of the people that you're supporting. Could we scroll down, please, Yola? Thank you very much. So Shari has mentioned well-being, and obviously this is a key issue at this time. Portland College have developed a well-being journal for their high-functioning learners, and that is well worth a look. You may not be able to use it in entirety, but there might be bits of that you could use for learners who are not so high functioning. Shari's already mentioned the calm down jar, and there are some other examples of materials there that will support well-being. And then if we scroll down again, there are some curriculum resources here that have been developed by the different contributing colleges. We'll not go through those in detail, but hopefully you'll be kind of inspired to take a look after this webinar. There's a wide range from English and maths based activities through to creating movie trailers using iMovie, and instructional videos for doing beans on toast, and I think everything in between. So I just urge you to have a look at those materials and get some ideas from them. So thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Angela, who's going to pick up the work-based learning cohort. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Good afternoon, everybody. Yola, is it possible for you to go to the work-based learning? You're nearly there now. Yeah, thank you. So if you just scroll down to the beginning section, that's great. Thank you. So I just want to talk about the purpose of the work-based learning programme group, because we were aware that predominantly learners on an employment pathway may find it impossible or feel that it's impossible to continue learning and making progress. So the work here was around employment pathways and supported internships this year, or for learners that were hoping to progress onto any of those pathways next year. And the focus was really on reducing the impact of C19 on learner progress against their goals on their EHCPs. I think everybody's talked about the effective practice principles, and I think it's really important that people look at those before they dive into the materials, because it helps you understand how you can plan learning and individualize it, and just really use the checklist as a self-audit tool to make sure everybody's clear about how to structure these individualized programs. So if we just go down a little bit, Yola, thank you. So you can see there's a range of resources available. We provided guidance on the use of these materials for the learners at high functioning, but also to support parent and carers, including risk assessments, because obviously some of the activities involve using tools and machinery. So we wanted to make sure that parent carers had advice on how to do a risk assessment, and also to understand levels of support required and ways to support, so they weren't overcompensating. There are a range of resources which I'm not going to go into now, but I'd advise you to look into them, and you'll see that they are exemplars or examples of what practitioners have been using, but obviously will need contextualising for your individual learners. We developed a range of activities in length, breadth and depth, because we were aware that some people might need to do short standalone activities, so things like CV writing or preparing for interview. And we also encouraged the use of interactive and online face-to-face resources to support the well-being of learners as they could meet with their tutors online or peers, but also to develop the ICT skills along with maths and English. And you'll see those identified in the resources themselves. We also looked at longer term project-based activities so that learners could use that to plan their time and be organised, and also so they had some kind of ownership and choice over when they were working. And there are some workbooks, excellent workbooklets on there that look at both the theory and the practice. And I'd encourage you to look at those. The employment skills one from Portland is quite a meaty piece of work, but it's very useful for the high functioning learners. The practical activities support learners being assessed as well. So we looked at how we could ensure, and I know this links into theme 2, how we could ensure that learners were demonstrating that learning was continuing and that they were meeting specific targets related to their EHCPs. And again, linking back to what Shari said, we were focusing on particular activities that supported their achievement, not filling in time. We also provided tips on how to capture the evidence. So we supported learners and parent carers by offering them iPads, etc., so that they could video or take photographs. We supported parents understanding how to write a witness statement, and again, offering a support level to parent carers based on their needs, so that they felt comfortable in providing evidence of learner achievement, and again, referring back to not over supporting. We've tried out some of these activities. Obviously they're from practitioners, and you can dip into the virtual lesson and see how, again, we've used the interactive aspect of the learning materials. And we also tried to cover a range of postal work, so not everybody accesses Teams or IT, they're not comfortable with that. So with everything that we've developed, we've got a paper-based version as well, unless it is obviously an interactive online activity. And I think I'm there with that. I think I would just advise you to have a look at some of those materials, and hopefully they'll give you some ideas on how you could adapt them to suit your needs, or at least give you an idea of something you could develop that's vocationally relevant. So that's me, and I'd like to hand over to Jay from Newfriars College.
Thank you and good afternoon. Yola, if we could go back into learning materials and then click on the PMLD link, that would be very helpful. Thank you. So the group that looked at profound and multiple learning difficulties, we are very conscious that this is quite a broad group of young people, and we're also very much aware that the materials that we were developing quite often will overlap with other of the subgroups that we're talking through today. So where we are providing examples, you might well find that if you are looking, for example, at the sensory impairment section or young people on the autism spectrum, that you will see some of those resources would be adapted, and you can see links between the different areas. So if we start at the top of this page, we've put in some top tips. We're very conscious that young people with profound and multiple learning difficulties, the gap between college and home could seem the greatest. They may be used to one-to-one support, they may be used to a very particular form of communication support, they may be reliant on therapies which will be addressed in another area of this project. But our focus then was, how do we make the work meaningful, and how do we as much as possible embed educational health and care plan outcomes into today life. So those are the tips that we wanted to sort of reflect on at the beginning of this section, and there are some examples, some links that practitioners can follow about how to make activities practical, about how to embed day-to-day activities into meaningful learning, but also about making sure that everything was person-centred, but where possible the anxieties and worries about parents about whether they are able to meet the needs of the young people at home could be ameliorated by giving them some very practical activities. We also tried, where possible, to look at extended projects. So we looked at journals, we looked at growing seeds, we looked at activities that didn't require multiple worksheets or multiple short activities, which are difficult to set, difficult to complete and to provide feedback on. And also, certainly in our context and in others, not all of our young people had access to IT, not all of our young people can use IT, and potentially if there was a laptop in the house, 5 people are trying to use it. So we had to take those into account as well. So under top tips, we started to break down some of the sort of core learning requirements of young people with PMLD. So we've started with embedding sensory learning. If you could scroll down a little for me, Yola. Sensory learning is often the core of the curriculum provided in college, and again the other parts of this project have covered sensory learning and scavenger hunts, and those sorts of themes of embedding awareness of your day-to-day environment within either a story context or a home context is some of the examples that we have provided there. We also have looked at communication at home. If you could just scroll down, thank you, Yola. We have provided some examples of some of the resources that we've developed to both teach at times families, but also to support communication with young people. Without that daily reminder, without those key pieces of work, will start potentially to lose their communication skills, and we wanted to provide resources that families could use. There's a link there to Makaton at Home, Makaton and others of the images that are used on these resources are requiring a license, and many organisations will have licenses and so would be able to use these images. If not, you need to find images that are copyright appropriate but also are suitable for your young person. However, at this time of COVID-19, a number of resources have been made free to access, including Makaton healthcare cards, and there are some lovely singing hand videos that are going out on a regular basis, if not daily, that can be shared to be completed at home, again reinforcing core communication, but really quite a fun and engaging activity. We were also conscious, if we scroll down a little bit further, that communication devices that might be utilised at college may or may not be fully integrated into life at home, and so we've provided some information for parents and carers to access, but also to encourage them to use the communication tools that work on a day-to-day basis within the family. The next section is on intensive interaction and interactive approaches. Quite a wide range of examples, including some videos that you can link into to show you how this works. Very much focused at supporting families, giving them the tools to work intensively with a young person to support them through an activity when that young person is at their earliest levels of cognitive development. And again, a recording log to help at home to keep track of what it is that is being covered, what is working well, etc. And there is interaction examples and interaction guidance. So those are pieces of material that you would want to take, look at as practitioners, and then share with families as appropriate. And the very last example or very last resource we wanted to share was around TACPAC. There is a cost attached, however, because it has been a useful tool that practitioners have been using during this period of time, we wanted to share that with you, and obviously practitioners, colleagues, settings can explore that to see whether that would be something of use to them. So yes, I would very much encourage you to go in, dip in, look around, but also to connect with some of the resources in the other parts of the project, because quite often they are overlapping and you can see how they could be adapted for different young people. I'm going to pass back to Dawn, who is going to talk a little bit more about parents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay. That segments very nicely actually into what I wanted to say about parents. So if you could just scroll down a little bit more, thank you very much. We found it really difficult when we were developing the resource not to talk about parents and carers. So we knew there was a whole theme around the role of parents and carers going on, but when you're so dependent on people in the home environment supporting the young person with their learning, how could we separate that out? So the key message here, I think, is please go to the families page and look at the detailed work that has gone on with the group of people who have developed that resource. But we just wanted to point out a few key points within our learning materials section, and really kind of the things that came up over and over again was around the kind of the variability in the level of engagement from parents and carers. They're not professionals for the most part. Yep, there'll be some teachers amongst our parents and carers, obviously. They're very well meaning usually. They want to do the very best they can to support the young person's learning, but there's a whole raft of other things happening within households that will impact on a parent or carer's ability to support that young person, and we need to be mindful of that. A number of the panelists have already spoken about either capacity to use technology or actually just the kit within the home and the demands that are being made on the technology within the home by other family members. So we should be considering a wide range of methods, and not depending completely on an online approach. And just really the final point there is just making sure that our expectations of parents are reasonable, and supporting them and guiding them to to help them to do their very best, which most of them would want to be doing. I think we've heard quite a few journeys really that some organisations and individuals have had with parents, where kind of initially in the early days of lockdown there was a resistance there to become engaged, and maybe that was around the fact that people felt daunted by that, but actually as they've come to develop that very different relationship with college staff, the relationship is much more open, and parents and carers are really coming on board with supporting that the learners programs. So I think there's some real examples of that working very, very well now. The final thing that I'd like to draw your attention to before we take questions for this section are the additional links. And I said, I think fairly close to the beginning, that it was not our intention to create a massive resource bank, but we have put together a list of links. We've categorised it. It's a little bit rough and ready, but there are some really, really useful links out to other resources and other materials. Yola, if you could just quickly click on the suggestions so that colleagues can get an idea as to how that's been presented, and if you could just scroll through. So yeah, so we've categorised, and then we've given the link to the kind of resource, and in most cases a short description of what you'll find if you follow that link. And I think that concludes our input for the learning material. So this is a good time for us to take questions. I don't know whether there are any questions already in the question pane.
There aren't any questions at the moment, Dawn.
Okay. Shall we just give literally a few seconds for people to either raise their hands or ask a question if they want to at this point, and then we'll move on. So Yola, whilst we're giving people an opportunity, could you just go to the progress section?
Sure.
Thank you. So no questions at the moment?
Just checking the questions now. I don't think we've got any at the moment.
Okay, let's move on then, and we will take questions at the end. Okay, so the monitoring progress section, if you could scroll down, please. And a bit further. Oh, sorry. If we could go to the I think this is the home page. So if we could actually go to the monitoring progress part at the top. Yeah, thank you. Great. Okay, so there's a similarity in the way in which all of the themes have been presented. So there's an introduction, there's a thank you to the contributors, and then we have developed for this theme some effective practice principles. If you could just scroll down a bit further, please. So what we thought it was important here, before we consider the principles for recording progress and giving meaningful feedback, we just thought, well, we need to really kind of go back to the principles for home learning. So very much about, you know, kind of building on those 8 principles for home learning. And then if you could move down, please, Yola. So a continuation of those to kind of think about specifically about progress and feedback. So, you know, we really want to focus on those learning priorities and why they're important, and making sure that people are aware of those, the learner and the people that are supporting them, and make sure that the kind of the activities link to targets. Many of the things that we've already spoken about, you know, in terms of engaging with families, is really important here, because obviously we're, for the most part, apart from the most independent learners, we're dependent on families and carers supporting the individual to return their work. Point 12 there, really kind of focusing on a flexible approach, just being open to a real range of approaches for getting work returned and for evidencing learning. And, you know, kind of as we discuss this, and it's quite a difficult area, although again it was a journey, was seen with many of the practitioners that that supported this project. People were finding that the informal methods were more effective, because I think people were not feeling overwhelmed by completing pro formas, or, you know, just being able to kind of return a picture through email, or to send something through a Facebook page, and that sort of informal approach seemed to be working. We felt that it was very important to be able to provide regular feedback to learners, to help them to understand what they've done well, and to use that then to inform future planning, and just make sure that it was fun, and we were including targeted praise. And there are some examples, I think Loki will probably talk to us later, around self-evaluation and peer assessment, and the ways in which we can address some of the social isolation issues that are arising from the pandemic, really, and bringing groups of people together and providing feedback in a, you know, kind of in a more social way. So just moving on then to the next bit, we have developed a progress and feedback checklist, and again in the same way as with the learning materials, this can be used as an audit tool. It can be downloaded from the link, and we've split it up into sections. So we've got a couple of considerations for home learning, and then something around setup. And if you scroll down a bit further for us, then there's a review, reviewing the delivery of learning, and there's the link to the progress monitoring progress checklist. So if we then move on to the next section of this resource, which is around the context. So again, there's some overlap with what we spoke about in the previous section for learning materials. So a suggestion again that review meeting is very important, so that you can establish those learning priorities for the young person whilst they're learning at home. We've provided in this part of the resource some kind of tools for you to be able to record some of the outcomes of the discussions and conversations that have gone on with people at home. And there's a nice example that Newfriars College has developed. And then here again we are reminding people of the professional standards. So there's some guidance around making sure that our professional standards are maintained, and there's the reference there again to the best practice guide for video conferencing. So if we move down please, Yola, to the exemplars. Thank you. So sorry, could you just go up a tiny little bit? Because I think, thank you, I think this is really important. So when we were developing this resource, it was clear that there had been a huge amount of activity gone into thinking about how to set work and how to deliver learning activities into the home. But practitioners that were involved in this part of the project were really kind of struggling consistently to with solutions for monitoring progress and giving feedback. That's not to say there were not pockets of practice that were going on, but we were finding inconsistency really. And I think the key thing here is that we all said to each other really was, you know, kind of, we're not going to get it right all of the time. So if something that you try doesn't work, then let's have a think about that and let's amend it and try something else, because this is very complex. You know, it's not only are we thinking about meeting the needs of the individual, but we're also meeting the needs of the people that are supporting them and considering what's going on within that home environment. So, you know, it's not surprising that it's challenging to get this right. So under monitoring engagement with home learning, we've got a couple of examples here, again, as tools that have been developed by National Star College and by Queen Alexandra College, that are have been used to provide a record for of the conversations that have gone on, but not only to provide a record, but also to, in the case of National Star, to kind of structure that conversation. So I think the tool that's shared there has been really welcomed by members of staff that have been making the contact with home, because it's just provided them with that outline for the sort of things that they should be touching on and talking to parents and carers about. The tool that QAC has developed is they've been actually sending that home. So they've been either sending hard copies or emailing that to parents and carers and asking them to complete it and return it to the college, and then using that information when they've received it back. Campbell Wakefield have developed a tracking spreadsheet, because one of the things that many organisations have identified is that actually it's quite difficult to keep track of work that's been set, work that's been completed, and you know, kind of the next steps. So this is quite a nice way, although we do think it's probably more useful in a smaller organisation, but it's a good way of tracking the work that's been set. Or maybe even not at an organisational level, it could be that if you've got a pastoral tutor that's responsible for a particular caseload of learners, they could use something like that themselves. And some other examples, obviously not all colleges are Databridge users, but there has been some innovative ways in which Databridge has been developed, particularly the event log category functionality to be able to monitor home learning activity, and that's worked quite well. So moving on to thinking about evidence of learning, we've got some really nice examples again. As colleagues have said earlier, I just really urge you to have a look at these resources in your own time. But colleges have shared incredibly generously. If you have a look at the RNRB College Loughborough's Rainbow Craft project, it's beautiful. It's just full of lovely, lovely ideas, differentiated to meet a wide range of needs, and it's got embedded functional skills activities within it. And they've also included tracking sheets and suggestions for how work can be returned back to college. And this would be an example. The Rainbow Craft project would be an example of a project where the college has actually sent out physical packs. So they've packaged up craft project packs and delivered them to learners' homes, obviously observing social distancing requirements. But that's a nice project to look at. Loki, I think at this point it would be good to hand over to you and ask you just to kind of talk about your approach and what you've done at St John's with your daily briefs.
Thanks, Dawn. Like Dawn said earlier, it's been a bit of a journey. But from the outset, we were really conscious of not overwhelming parents and for the briefs to be very simple and very easy to access. We do have some higher level learners that could access themselves, but largely we're dependent on parents to be able to access and provide learning at home. So we are sending out five daily briefs, differentiated to our learners. So we go from about M5 up to about entry level 1. Each brief contains 3 activities. We've pared down our timetable and we're focusing really closely onto EHCP outcomes and core skills. The briefs are really clear, they're organised and contain all the information the parents or the learner needs to not only complete the activities, but also to provide feedback of learning where they can. I think the important thing with the brief is the structure. So it's been developed over time in conversation with parents. Each activity that we present has a very clear task objective. What we were finding is parents were struggling to kind of see the relevance of some of the learning where it was embedded into vocational tasks. So we've it's a very, very clear task objective and also an email address for the teacher that set the work. This opens a line of communication directly between the parent and the teacher. So where they may need a little bit more guidance or a little bit more specialist help, they can do that directly. But also it gives a very clear path for evidence to be submitted. We've been quite flexible. We're quite flexible in what evidence parents can submit and how they can submit evidence of learning. Again, this has been developed in conversation, and as we've said, a lot of parents, or homes may not have tech or they may not have multiple laptops. So where we've assessed that, we can send out hard copies of the briefs and all of the activities. And in terms of evidence coming back, we've guided parents to sort of kind of understand what evidence might look like. So parents can submit photographs, they can submit witness statements, they can submit videos, and in cases where none of that is possible, we've opened a channel where they can submit evidence over the phone by just giving a brief description to staff in welfare calls. If you in the section we've got a completed brief for you to have a look at, but there's also a blank brief if you wanted to adapt that and kind of make it your own and make it work for your college. I think if there's anything else I've got. I think it's just been really important to meet the needs of the parents as well as the learners. We are reliant on them, but we wanted the learning to be meaningful, and we wanted them to feel that it was meaningful instead of filler activities. So we focused on very short, concise activities that they can do that feed directly into EHCPs. I think that's all of mine.
Loki, thank
Yeah.
you very much. I just wondered whether you might want to say something about the Zoom calls and
Yeah,
the kind of the peer interaction within those.
Peer interaction, sure. So one thing that we found throughout is that learners are missing the social interaction with each other and with their usual groups or session groups or tutor groups. The way that we've set the briefs up, they have activities that they can do at home and complete at home, but we're starting to use Zoom calls for the learners to join the group and just feedback about the work that they've done and support peer interactions and peer review of work and give that meaningful feedback between learners, which not only supports the learning itself but also supports the social interaction and communication around it. And this has been really successful for learners. It's a really nice opportunity for them to show what they've done, to kind of motivate them into being part of the groups again, and provide that meaningful feedback. Does that cover it, Dawn? Sorry.
That's perfect. Thank you very
Lovely.
much indeed. Thank you. I'll take over again now if that's okay. Thank you. Okay, so just finishing off this section, I think we've got a real breadth of examples here, and we've got no tech, we've got low tech, we're right the way through to high tech. So we spoke about the kind of the craft project drop-offs and the kind of the hard copy target sheets and tracking within that. Loki's just given us some examples of what they're doing at St John's College and the kind of the way in which they're adapting provisions just to make sure that it's completely flexible and that people can engage in whatever way suits their needs. We've got some really nice examples from Oakley College as well, where this is a fabulous example of where a concept that is very familiar to the learners has been flipped. So when learners have typically been in college, they've had a newsletter group and they've worked on a newsletter that in college that has gone to parents and carers to tell parents and carers about what's been going on in college. But now, because the learners are at home, they've been submitting with their parents and carers contributions from their home learning experiences that have been compiled into a newsletter to be shared with their peers, which is lovely. And there's an example of the newsletter there. And they, Oakley College, have also very kindly shared quite a technical document, this one, but they have taken Microsoft Teams, their use of Microsoft Teams, onto the next level. And there's some quite specific guidance there. It's a how-to guide, how to provide feedback using Microsoft Teams. If anybody's using Microsoft Teams for assignments and things like that, then it's well worth a look at what Oakley College have produced. And then Campbell Wakefield is encouraging learners just to complete a working from home diary and kind of log in their activities. And that's a way in which they're getting a record of what the learners are up to. Portland College have got an example here around providing verbal feedback to learners using Screencast-O-Matic, which is like it's an online screen recorder which needs to be provided in advance of delivering that feedback to learners. So that's kind of quite a high-tech way of doing it, but the example that you'll be able to access shows you how effective that can be. Could we just scroll down, please, Yola? Okay, so the final part of this is about recording progress and achievement, and the use of existing tracking tools. So I think something that came back from all of the colleagues that were considering this this aspect of the home learning project was you know, kind of thinking about continuing to use what you already use within your colleges. So now's not a time to start doing things differently. So think about transferring that progress and achievement data into your existing MIS, but also thinking very carefully about the validity of the evidence. So some colleagues previously in this webinar have referred to levels of support from parents and carers. So you know, you need to be confident that the progress that's been recorded is as a result of the, you know, the learner doing that work. You need to know what levels of support have been provided by parents and carers, and an approach that a number of organisations have been taking is to capture that learning informally, and then, you know, for any returning learners, as we start to get back to normal, revisit that learning when they're back within the college environment. So I think that's all for that particular section. So an opportunity for you to ask questions now.
Right. If anyone has any questions, if they want to type them in the panel below, and I will ask the questions to the group, to the presenting group. We don't have any questions, Dawn.
Okay, that's great. So I think the only other thing to say about this is that the website is now live. You've obviously got the detail on the screen, and I assume, Yola, that will the presentation be sent out to attendees? You are free, obviously, to have a look at the website.
There'll be a recording of the presentation available on the Natspec YouTube channel.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Okay. And as ever, Natspec would welcome your feedback. If there's anything that you think we've missed, or please tell us, and we always want to improve what we do and work on feedback that we're given from the sector. So we've
a very nice message from Sarah Powell, who's saying she can't wait to look at the website, and thank you to everyone who's put it together.
Oh, that's really lovely, thank you. Yeah, so finally from me, you've seen from the contributors on the pages that we've quickly skimmed, you know, I've worked with a significantly large group of very generous colleagues that have worked on both of these areas. We've had some of the key contributors have joined us today, so special thanks to Angela, to Shari, to Jay and to Loki for joining us for this webinar. But just a huge thank you to all of the colleagues that have contributed, because I think in a very short space of time we've developed something that we hope will be really useful to colleagues across the sector. So thank you, everybody. And thank you to everyone for attending. I think that concludes this webinar.
Just before we close, we've got a thank you from Jeff Lively, who says that the resources are looking fab, and also thank you from Melanie Sampson for the resource on the webinar, which has been really informative.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for those comments. Thanks. Okay, so if we've not got any further comments or questions, we'll ask Yola to end the webinar. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for attending, and thanks once again to the panelists.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.